10. Mother's murder. Ashley Pegram of South Carolina had 3 children and lived in the small town of Somerville. She was a kind person, and she was hoping to find a partner to share her life with. On April 3, 2015, Ashley went out on her first date with a young man named Edward Bonilla. It was the last time she was ever seen alive. Ashley was missing for days, and those days dragged into weeks. Nobody knew where she was. Her family couldn't get a hold of her, and the police had to get involved. They ended up finding her body in a shallow grave in the middle of the woods over a month later. The obvious suspect from the beginning was Edward. He was the last person to see her alive, and he didn't strike the authorities as the most stable individual. Plus, there was a mountain of evidence stacked up against him. First of all, his phone pinged at various cell phone towers leading from the place of the date all the way out to Harleyville, where the body was discovered. After the police applied pressure, Edward admitted to murdering Ashley. Edward said he and Ashley had been drinking and that he accidentally hit her with his mom's car. Apparently, she had gotten out of the vehicle to use the toilet, and he accidentally ran her over a little bit. After that, she became wild and erratic. She grew violent and upset with Edward, and so he restrained her to keep himself safe, and in the process, strangled her to death. It was all a really weird excuse. And in the end, Edward was given life in prison for his first date murder. 9. First date with a maniac. In February of 2019, Elaine Campos, a 57-year-old single mom, was beaten viciously in her own apartment in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It happened while on her first date with a savage maniac. This maniac is named Vinicius Serra, 30 years younger than his victim. According to the attacker, he woke up in the night, had a psychotic outbreak, and was compelled to hit the woman. He viciously attacked her for 4 hours until help arrived. She was left with a broken nose, the orbital bones around her eyes nearly shattered, her face fractured, her teeth gone, and in need of over 40 stitches. It all started 8 months earlier when they began talking on social media. They chatted for a very long time, developed a friendship, and really thought things were going well. Then Elaine invited Vinicius to her apartment. The pair went to bed together, and then she was awoken in the middle of the night by a fist to her face. She screamed, tried to defend herself, and then passed out from being beaten so mercilessly. She was only rescued when she woke up hours later and started screaming because the man was still beating her. Her neighbors broke down the door, apprehended the maniac, and handed him over to the police. So far, the only motive he's given is that he's completely insane. And yeah, it definitely looks that way. 8. The speedboat date. In December of 2015, Jack Shepard and Charlotte Brown were thrown off a boat. Charlotte died, and Jack was totally unhurt. The pair had been on their first date when it happened, when Jack suggested they go speedboating on the River Thames in England. Backing it up to the beginning, Jack Shepard was the kind of guy who liked to date a lot of girls. He had purchased the speedboat specifically to try and seduce women on it, and it was working up until he and Charlotte got a little too deep into the champagne. He got drunk, he was trying to impress her by driving erratically, and he lost control of the motorized vehicle. The boat flipped, Charlotte was flung into the river, and it was the last date she would ever go on. In the court proceedings that followed, we learned that Jack had used his boat to seduce at least 10 women, then bring them back to his houseboat in Hammersmith. Maybe it was his bachelor lifestyle that really rubbed the jury the wrong way, but they convicted him of manslaughter by gross negligence and gave him 10 years in prison. 7. The getaway driver. A 40-year-old woman in Massachusetts went on a date with a man named Christopher Castillo. They met for the very first time that very day, December 5, 2016. The woman agreed to pick Christopher up at his parents' house in Rhode Island. Then they drove about 30 minutes north into Attleboro, where she was living. And to make things really bizarre, the woman said Christopher was slouched in the passenger seat and drinking wine the whole time she was driving. It was a really weird start to a date. And to be totally honest, the woman probably should have put an end to it before it got so out of hand. But alas, human politeness gets us into all kinds of bizarre situations. Christopher asked his date if she could stop at the Bristol County Savings Bank. She should have taken the opportunity to drive away and leave the man there. But she didn't. Instead, she sat and waited. Little did she know Christopher was inside the bank pulling off a robbery. He sprinted back to her car with a gun, a hat and glasses he'd used as a disguise, and $1,000 in cash. It didn't take long for the cops to catch up to them. After all, it wasn't even 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A police officer saw the car drive by, pulled up behind it, and flashed his lights, and the woman pulled into the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts. She immediately stepped out of the car and flung her hands up, and the police had to struggle to pull her date out of the passenger seat. The woman was arrested as an accessory after the fact and held on a bail of $250,000. However, the prosecutors did eventually drop the charges and released her when it became clear she had been used. As for the date, he was given 3 years for robbery and 2 years for assaulting the police officers in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot. 6. The Handsome Bachelor. The dating game was a wildly popular TV show back in the 1970s. On September 13, 1978, the Bachelorette on the show, Cheryl Bradshaw, chose Bachelor number 1 from the lineup of eligible men. His name was Rodney Alcala, and unbeknownst to her, he was a brutal murderer. More than that, he was an active serial killer. After the show was over, it would have been typical for the two to go on a date. This was, after all, the dating game. But when they went backstage and Bradshaw met the man she had chosen on the show, something didn't feel right. He offered her a first date that she would never forget, and Bradshaw felt something in her gut that wasn't right. She turned him down and said she never wanted to see him again. Her intuition likely saved her life. That first date probably would have been the death of her. But thanks to that gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach, she never found out. But if the show had done a background check on Rodney, she never would have been put in that position in the first place. They would have seen that Rodney had spent 5 years in prison for abusing children and had been on the top 10 most wanted fugitives list of the FBI. Plus, he had already killed 4 women. He was caught the next year after abducting a 12-year-old girl from the beach. The girl's friends were able to help a sketch artist create a picture of the abductor's face, and the police immediately recognized Rodney as the killer. He spent the rest of his life in prison before dying of natural causes. 5. Catfished and robbed. In 2016, Plenty of Fish was the dating app of choice. Tinder was only just getting started, and a lot of people in America were still using the classic POF. One of these people was a man named Adam Hillary, hoping to meet a nice girl. Instead, he met Haley Rose Bustos. She was definitely a girl, but she was not very nice. He picked her up, and they went bowling in the small town of Winter Haven, Florida. After that, they went back to his place, hung out for a bit, met his roommate, and then Haley went home. After the date, Haley sent Adam a text saying she had had a good time. She wanted to meet up the night after at his place. So the next night rolled around. Adam thought something exciting was going to be happening, and then everything went real dark, real quick. Haley brought 3 strange men to Adam's house, including 2 men with a sordid history of crime and violent felonies. All 3 overpowered Adam and entered his house, and that was the end. They dragged Adam into the kitchen, he cried and begged for his life, and he was executed right there on his kitchen floor. According to Auburndale's Deputy Police Chief Andy Ray, the suspects then went downstairs, pulled their car up to the front of the apartment, and loaded up Adam's Xbox, his TV, and iPhone, all the valuables that Haley had spotted the night before. For her role in the robbery, she was given $50 by the other guys. The man who actually pulled the trigger, identified as Andre Warner, was convicted of the crime, and the jury recommended that he get the death penalty. However, the case is still ongoing. 4. The first date stabber. A 19-year-old, perfectly ordinary-seeming young woman with her whole life ahead of her used an online dating app to lure a man to his death. We don't know this girl's name because she's German and the country has very strict privacy laws. We only know her as Sarah M., but we at least know a few things about the case. She idolized American serial killers with posters of Ted Bundy and Richard Ramirez on her wall. She was disturbed, or at least dangerously obsessed. Prior to the attack in May of 2021, Sarah purchased a camping knife. Then she set up a fake dating profile under the name Domina Cherry. That same day, she started talking to a man named Zayed E., nearly 20 years older than her. This man picked Sarah up from her apartment in Bavaria, and as they drove down the street, she plunged the camping knife into his neck. We don't know how exactly she thought this would end, but whatever she had thought in her brain, that's not how it went down. She had nowhere to go, the man was bleeding to death in his car, and she fled the scene covered in his blood. The police tracked her down within the hour while her date was taken to the hospital. He died 3 weeks after the incident, and Sarah was given a sentence of 12 years at a therapeutic facility. 3. The Tinder Killer. And yet another twisted case of online dating gone wrong. A New York nurse was killed. The killer is Danielle Drayton from Connecticut, who strangled Samantha Stewart after a first date in 2019. The pair met on Tinder. They went on their first date, and then Samantha invited the strange man back to her apartment. Once inside, Drayton did away with the poor woman, then performed lewd acts on her cold corpse. It really doesn't get much sicker than this. The maniac who committed this awful crime, as if desecrating a body wasn't enough, then stole Samantha's credit cards and used one of them to pay for a flight to California. He thought he could get away, but was captured there within the week and extradited back to New York. And if you'd like to feel a little bit sick about the justice system, just listen to this. At the time of Samantha's death, her killer had just been freed on a bail of $2,000. He was waiting to stand trial in Nassau County for strangling a different woman. Basically, he should have been in jail already. And because he wasn't, Samantha became his next victim. 2. Ran over. In late 2014, a first date ended with one man dead, killed by the woman he had gone on a date with. She ran him over with his own truck. According to the police, the incident happened about 45 minutes from Seattle. The man and woman had known each other for only a handful of hours. They were drinking a lot, and they went to visit one of the man's friends to keep the party going. The friend happened to be a tattoo artist. She asked if he could give her a small tattoo on her chest, and as he was tattooing her, they began to get intimate. This angered the first man, who had brought the woman there in the first place. The two men got into a disagreement. The woman punched her original date in the face, and then he slapped her back. It was chaos. It was around this time that she fled. She ran outside wearing nothing but a t-shirt, jumped into her date's truck, and then ran him over with it. Leon Shaw, 53 years old, was discovered dead in his friend's driveway. The woman crashed the truck a quarter-mile down the road and had to be rescued by paramedics and taken to the hospital. 1. The Unwelcome Guest. A man was forced to call the police back in 2017 after his summer date with a Tinder stranger went horribly wrong. Everything started out all right, and then the man invited his date back to his home. Once there, she refused to leave. She literally would not get out of this guy's house and simply stayed in his bed all day, even after he asked her to scram. It was one of those slow creeping things that just kind of snuck up on him. He first told her that she had to leave before bedtime because he had to go to work in the morning. She asked if she could stay for a quick dinner, and he said okay. Then after dinner, she purposely passed out before he could say anything. He had to shake her out of her fake sleep, but she said she wouldn't leave because she was too tired. After 2 days of this, the man finally called the cops and had the woman forcefully removed from his bed. It was a really weird experience, one that left him wondering if dating is even worth it anymore. Would you rather accidentally be the getaway driver of a bank robbery or stuck on a first date with a crazed killer? Let us know your first date nightmares in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.